Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Today we're going to be doing a quick little live chat. I'm going to just hit a couple of topics here, including SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, thyroid, and we'll just talk about hormone imbalances in general. We'll do a live Q&A here. If you guys want to chime in, feel free. I'll try to hit your questions as they come in. All right, so first thing, let's kind of make the connection here. I see lots of people with thyroid health issues. This could be anything from hair to gut issues, from bloating to constipation to diarrhea to malabsorption, to just general gut inflammation. And chronic gut issue is going to impact your hormones via a lot of ways, right? Most thyroid issues are going to have an autoimmune impact, meaning there's going to be an immune attack from your immune system on your thyroid tissue. And 80% of our immune cells are in our guts. And so if we have gut issues from food allergens, from dysbiotic bacterial imbalances, to just poor malabsorption, let's just say we're stressed, we're not moving our food and our moving our food through our intestines, having good intestinal motility, that can create lots of inflammation and that can impact our immune function. And so first thing we have to look at is we have to look at our immune system. Are we having immune stress that's hurting our thyroid? The first place we look at is the food. Second place, obviously, we look at is going to be the gut. And we can actually measure and test microbial imbalances. That's key. That's really cool. Second thing is we're going to see lots of issues with antibiotics. We get tons of antibiotic exposure, whether it's from lots of chlorine and chemicals inside of our water supply, pesticides, chlorine, excess, things like that are going to impact our microbiome. Whether it's just being overprescribed antibiotics is going to have a major impact on our gut microbiome. And thirdly, we're just going to have problems due to the lack of fermented foods in our diet. Lots of healthy probiotics in our diet, they just aren't there. And that's also going to have a major impact too. Second, we're overly stressed. We're not making enough acid. We're not making enough enzymes. That's going to be impacting how we digest and break down our foods. And so poor digestion is going to impact our ability to absorb foods. It's also going to impact our ability to have good, healthy motility. The more stressed we are, the more we're going to be activating our sympathetic nervous system, which is going to be moving blood flow towards the extremities, to the hands and feet, and away from the intestines to be able to digest, break down, and absorb. So it's very important that when we're dealing with thyroid health, that we're getting healthy levels of selenium. We're not overdoing the iodine. Iodine's kind of a controversial thing. I typically say, keep it under a milligram or so, maybe a half a milligram, a microgram. So under 1 milligram. So about 500 micrograms or so is good. There's studies on too much iodine can increase Hashimoto's and increase antibody attacks. We just got to be careful. A lot of people talking about overdoing the thyroid, the iodine for the thyroid. And some of the data on that showed that, a lot of the Japanese islanders, where a lot of these studies were based off of, weren't getting the 10 to 15 to 20 milligrams of iodine. They were getting maybe 10% of that, 1 to 2. And so mega dosing iodine could be problematic. And it's not typical. It's not what we're going to see. And if you overdo it in a supplement, that could potentially increase antibodies. And that could increase a lot of hydrogen peroxide due to the iodination process. You have these sodium iodine symporters that help bring iodine into the cell. That binds iodine to tyrosine and makes your T4. And then during that process, you are actually going to be creating hydrogen peroxide. So when you overstimulate that with extra iodine, you're spitting off more hydrogen peroxide. And if you don't have adequate levels of selenium, that could potentially cause more hydrogen peroxide and create more thyroid inflammation. And so when it comes to SIBO, how do we diagnose that? First thing is, if you feel better on a low FODMAP diet, that's a pretty telltale sign for me. So if we cut out the fermentables, that's a good sign that we're on the right track. We can do a stool test and see if we have hallmarks of SIBO-producing bacteria like Morganella, Citrobacter, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, etc., excess staph or Citrobacter or strep. If we have a lot of these things, 10, 100x above the reference range, that's a sign that we're on the wrong track. And so that tells us maybe there's some small intestinal bacterial overgrowth present. Again, it's not specific to where it is because all that stool comes out, you do a test, it's not telling you where it is. We can also run a breath test if we're curious, lactulose breath test, swallow some lactulose solution, measure it every 20 minutes, see where that happens, especially if it's before 2 hours. We kind of know that it's going to be more in that small intestinal region. Also, organic acid testing can be helpful. If we see lots of benzoate or hippurate, other markers like that, that tells us we're probably going to have some bacterial imbalances. Also, on a stool test, we'll run beta-glucuronidase. If we see lots of that, that's a sign of dysbiotic bacteria. And it's an indicator that we could have some SIBO present. Again, I don't really like to get into minutia. Is it SIBO? Is it just a generalized dysbiosis? The symptoms overlap and the treatment overlaps. And so it doesn't change things that much much for me. And so doesn't no need to get that nitty gritty in it. Really, the underlying factors that you have to go upstream to promote healing, those are going to be relatively the same. And when you work with patients, you try to tweak things and adjust things based on how patients respond and do. And so that being said, when we have thyroid issues, we really have to look at, do we have a chronic autoimmune issue? If we have a chronic autoimmune issue, then we have to be careful with the gluten, the foods that are driving the antibodies up. We got to get those antibodies down. And so maybe different nutrients we're going to use, whether it's selenium or magnesium, CoQ10, to help bring those antibodies back down. Also, are we pulling out the foods that could be driving that antibody stimulation? Gluten, casein, processed grains, excess omega-6 fatty acids. And are we getting the extra selenium? Are we looking at the gut? All these things play a big role. Also, if there's a chronic autoimmune attack, the thyroid hormone level could be pretty low. We may not be having enough hormones there. We may need some bioidentical or some natural desiccated thyroid glandular support just because we don't have enough function from that thyroid tissue, and we're going to need some bioidentical support to kind of help bump it up. Over time, the more that thyroid is inflamed and beaten down, it's possible that we're going to lose function of that tissue. So those functional follicles, that follicular tissue in that thyroid gland, it loses the ability to synthesize and make thyroid hormone. And so if that's the case, we may need to provide some additional non-desiccated thyroid support to get that hormone level up to at least mid-range, right? If we see elevated TSH or T3 in the bottom 25% of the range, we may need some support there. So you got to look at each person individually. I always like to look at thyroid hormone side by side cortisol, because chronically low cortisol can definitely have an impact with thyroid hormone. Chronically low cortisol can impact thyroid getting into the cells. It can also impact T4 to T3 conversion. So we really want to understand the cortisol implication with everything. It plays a big role. Now, I'll also look at mitochondrial function side by side adrenals and thyroid, because we're going to need good B vitamins, good methylation. We're going to need good folate and B12 and B6. We're going to need to look at CoQ10 levels. We're going to need to look at magnesium. We're going to need to look at sulfur and pyroglutamate and sulfate. These are going to be good markers that give me a good window into sulfur and how that's doing. So it plays a really important role. So when we look at everything, we want to look at it holistically so we can get a really good sense what the person needs here out of the gates. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed everything here out of the gates. If you did, feel free, put your links down below or put your comments down below. I'd love to see what you think about the topic. And if you need more support, I see patients functional medicine-wise all over the country. If you need that support, there'll be a link down below for you guys to reach out and get that support from myself and team. We're happy to help you guys to get to the root cause of your health challenges. All right, guys, have a phenomenal day. Take care.